good morning, based on wherever you are. Okay, so let's get started with the session. So this session is all about how do you get to a V85 plus on the GMAT focus. And now V85 plus is the kind of a score which you should target if you're targeting, let's say, the Ivy League schools. Let's say you're targeting schools like Stanford, Harvard, INSEAD, Wharton, and those kind of colleges. Then the kind of score you need to target in verbal is around 85. So with the right score in verbal and the other areas, you should be able to get into those schools. Now, how do you score that verbal 85? Now, when I was preparing as a student, I was very weak at verbal. And a lot of today's session is going to be about the learnings that I generated as a student myself and the learnings that I helped my students generate. And I've been in this industry for over 10 years now, and I've helped like hundreds and thousands of students get into their Dream B schools. You can think of any kind of scores. Our students have even scored 100 percentile on GMAT focus. So we have helped people get amazing scores in their GMAT. And even if you are, let's say, a retaker who is stuck at a score. So I'll take an example just to start with to give you some motivation to begin with. If you're someone who has already been studying for quite some time, Rishabh was one of our students who was studying very extensively, even with a very hectic investment banking job. He studied with 2 courses, Magoosh and eGMAT, and even then he was stuck at a 670. So he took the GMAT 3 years back approximately, and he was stuck at a 670 with just the verbal score of 34. And after 2 months of intensive practice, even after that verbal 34, 670 on GMAT, even after 2 months of intensive practice and effort, he still got another verbal 34 in another mock test. So he realized that the score was not moving forward at all. But he improved his score to 740 with a verbal 41, a 7-point jump in verbal just in 20 days using GMATWhiz, material GMATWhiz, learnings and all of that. And he got selected to INSEAD and Kellogg, eventually joined INSEAD. He's an INSEAD alum now. So why I shared this story was to help you understand that with the right guidance, with the right thought process and the right focus, you can convert your score to the right score and actually get selected into your Dream B school. Okay, so stay with me, understand the nitty-gritties that are required to get to a target score of verbal 85 plus. Now, I know many of you would have this thing in mind that you should know what I need a verbal 85 plus, but what kind of effort am I looking at? How much time that I need to put in? Now, I'll give you a broad idea. So if you're someone who is a retaker on GMAT, who has done some bit of prep already, then the time will obviously be different from a first-time test taker. So a retaker would require around 40 to 90 hours of focused efforts. Like they need to focus on their weak areas primarily. On the other hand, a beginner might take anywhere between 120 to 150 hours, depending on how good or bad they are in terms of the language. Like if some people have very good hold over the language, they might be able to do that in 100 hours also. But generally, I see people putting in about 120 to 150 hours as a beginner. And obviously, this is the time that you need to put in if you are moving in the right direction from the get-go. If you're not moving in the right direction from the get-go, then it can be anywhere. It can be even more than 200 hours. I've seen people putting in more than 200 hours and are still struggling with prep. So it's all about putting the right effort as well. Okay, so if you work with us, work with a course like GMATWhiz, get the right support, you should be able to complete that in this much time. But the first and foremost change that you need to do, because again, let me ask this question to you guys first. I see about 14-15 of you are live with me in the session today. I want to understand, what is the biggest challenge that you face in verbal? Can you guys tell me what is the biggest challenge that you guys face in verbal? Let me hear out from you guys. What is the biggest challenge that you face in verbal today? Let's hear some thoughts from you guys. What is the biggest challenge that you guys face in verbal today? Okay. Time management, Astha says, Nikhil says. Accuracy. See, accuracy is an outcome. It's not the challenge. And Nikhil, try and understand that. What's the main issue? Okay, Ankit says evolved reading. Breaking down an argument is what Ajay faces as a problem. Understanding in one time and RC rereading. Okay. I don't understand RC. All the questions of RC end up being incorrect. Interpreting RC is a bigger problem. Okay, so most of you are saying RC and some of you are saying, okay, breaking down an argument, time management and so on. So the first thing that we have to understand is that many times what we do as a student, and again, this is something which I'm telling you from experience. I've done the same mistake as a student. That's why I'm telling you. I always treated verbal as a very different entity from quant and data insights. Like what I felt was that quant is a very logical thing and verbal is a verbal thing at the end of the day. It's about the language, okay? And that mindset of mine actually created issues for me because I was not finding fault within myself. I was trying to fault somehow within the system, basically. So the first change that I always recommend, and the first change I had to do when I literally changed my verbal score from very, very poor to an amazing score, the first change I had to do was to change my mindset. The very big problem with a lot of people with the mindset is that they feel that they're not avid readers. Like many of you are talking about RC and all of that. I was someone who never read an entire book in my career, not completed an entire book in my career before I prepared for GMAT. I never completed a book. I did not like reading books. I was not an avid reader. And I always used to feel that if I'm not an avid reader, I'll not be able to do well in a verbal section. Like again, I'm not sure how many of you feel that. Like if you also feel these mindset issues are with you, you can simply say a yes in the poll. Like I'm going to bring up a few more. Many people think, and in fact, I used to think that there could be two correct answers in verbal. Like verbal is something which is subjective. Like that's what I used to feel personally, that in quant, in data insights, you have a clear-cut answer. You know that the answer is going to be this. There's no debate around that. On the other hand, in verbal, there could be two correct answers. Like I think this is the correct answer, for someone else that could be the correct answer. And I used to feel my vocab is weak. Like in GMAT, you have very dense passages, you have very dense comprehension, and that there are words which are very complex to understand. My vocab was weak. It was not very great. I did not understand complex topics or complex tests. Like if the topic was around, let's say, humanities, I did not have any idea about that. I used to feel, let's say, like an alien when I was reading that. I was feeling disinterested, and that used to kind of create issues for me as well. And there was not enough time. Like I felt that for solving this difficult verbal questions, I probably need more time. And many of you did say that I face time management issue, right? So I see many of you saying that you face these issues. Some of you saying you don't face these issues. So these are something which I feel many students think about verbal. And what you need to change is you need to change your mindset first. You need to start with a positive thought process. You need to tell yourself that the problem is not with the verbal section. The problem is the way I feel about verbal. You have to think about verbal not being subjective, and think about verbal also being as objective as quant is. Okay, GMAT has very standardized questions. There are never ever cases where you can say that there are two correct answers, just that one of them is better than the other. No, there is a clear-cut correct answer in every GMAT verbal question. And try to tell yourself that the problem is not with yourself. The problem is with the way you're solving questions. Again, I'm not saying that put the blame on you. The problem is not with you. If the problem was with you, it will be there in quant and data insights also. The problem is basically with the way you're solving questions, your approach of solving questions. And verbal is easy. You have to tell yourself that as well. See, in quant, you need to know the formulas, you need to know the rules, you need to know a lot of other things. In verbal, the answer is right there in front of you. In critical reasoning, you have an argument, you have the answer there in front of you. You just have to analyze the argument. In RC, the answer is in between those lines. You just have to infer the right things from the passage. Okay, and try and focus on this. This is very critical. Do not focus on doing more questions. A lot of people make this mistake that they focus on doing more questions in a day than learning from those questions. So instead of targeting doing, let's say, 15 questions of verbal in a day, do, let's say, 10 questions or maybe 7 questions. Okay, but make sure that you give enough time to analyze those questions. Try to see what is the process that you have followed to solve the questions and what is the right process supposed to be. So in verbal, it's very critical that you spend a lot of time analyzing the solutions, because generally people go wrong because of the approach. There's not really any concept that is tested in verbal. Now, before I move forward in helping you create an action plan, a quick overview of GMATWhiz. We are world's only truly personalized GMAT course out there, which uses real-term personalization to actually give you very focused insights in what you need to do to improve your scores from where you are today. So every GMAT student gets a personalized study plan. They know exactly what they need to do in each week. They get real-time improvement modules based on their weak area. So if you're not doing very well on the platform for whatever reason, you will automatically get to see in which areas you are weak, and you will get additional modules on those areas as well. And every student gets a dedicated mentor also, with whom they can interact every 2 weeks or so to understand from them what are the next steps that they need to follow. So in case you want to understand more about GMATWhiz, you can schedule a call on our calendar to understand more about what we offer. Okay, so that was just a small introduction about GMATWhiz. So let's get to the first part. Now, so sorry guys. Now, when I talk about verbal in general, as I said earlier, the main issue with verbal is that you need to change the mindset. You need to change the thought process around verbal. Now, this mindset sets in at a very initial stage when you start the prep, and that's where people generally go wrong. When they start their prep, their most common sequence of studying is that they will try to understand about all the different type of concepts tested on verbal. Like, for example, in CR, they will try to learn what is an inference question, what's an assumption question, and so on. So they'll try to learn about each question type. They'll then practice certain questions on it, maybe 15 to 20. For some people, they practice around 30 to 40 questions. So they have a certain set of questions in their mind that they practice. And then that's when they start moving to sectional tests and mock tests, basically. But on the other hand, when you follow this approach, what you're doing is you're not focusing on developing a methodology to solve verbal questions. And that methodology is very, very critical. Just by doing practice questions and a test, which is a very question-heavy strategy, you cannot ace GMAT verbal. You need to make sure that you have the right mindset in place. Now, it's very, very important to understand this in depth. So let's take an example. So I'll take my own example. When I started, I equated verbal with English. I equated quant with maths, and I thought reading comprehension is all about reading. So how I start, and it was not just me, it was with other students also, because the coaching class that I was attending, that's how the tutors were asking people to think about, okay, reading comprehension is reading. So you know what? You start reading newspapers every single day. Like I remember my tutor used to tell me that, okay, Piyush, you know what? Every day you just sit in the morning, go through the editorial sections of good daily newspapers like the Hindu or something, or the Statesman. I was in Calcutta Association and was a very well-known paper over there. So they used to ask me to read editorial sections for half an hour, 40 minutes, try to time myself, see how quickly I'm able to read things, and improve that time over a period of time. Try to read things fast. And that's a very common problem which I saw with many people. Like, they get the wrong advices and then they do the wrong things. So how I learned reading comprehension, if I go back to my early days, was that my tutors taught me, okay, what's a main point question, what's a detailed question, what's an inference question. They taught me about all question types. Okay, in a main point question, the main point should be related to the entire passage. It should not be just related to a certain paragraph of it. So they used to tell me the neat tricks and tips that are required. And then they used to give me passages to solve. There was study material. There was obviously the material which was given in the class. They used to give us passages to solve, and then after 20-30 minutes, they used to ask us to tell us the answers, and then they used to just explain the answers. And when I was really, really struggling with RCs, my RC accuracy used to be about 30% or so, if I remember correctly, in the beginning. When I went to them and I asked them how to do that, they told me, Piyush, you know what? You need to skim through the passages. You are doing too much reading of the passage. You should skim through. You need to read the passage as fast as possible so that you have time to eliminate the choices. You need to solve more passages, do more practice, you will get better. But the core problem was, no one taught me how to read a passage. No one taught me how to read a passage. Tell me one thing, how many of you have focused first on developing the skills of how to read a passage before solving questions? And be very honest about it. If you have done that, say yes. And how to read a passage is not about skimming, guys. If you think how to read a passage is about skimming, how quickly you can rush through, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you involving yourself in the passage, understanding how to relate to each point of the passage, and then moving forward. How many of you have learned the art of reading a passage first before going to solving questions? A quick yes, no in the poll will help, guys. How many of you have learned the art of reading the passage first and then only you started practicing questions? Or someone taught you that art? That, okay, this is how you need to read. This is how you need to understand each part of the passage. This is how you break down each piece, move to the next part, connect the dots, understand the facts, understand the opinions, differentiate between the author's opinion and a third party opinion. How many of you have done that? Okay, so I see a 40-60 split. I see 40% of you saying yes, I have done that. That's really great to see, guys. But there are still majority of you, around 60% of you, saying that I did not learn that. Trust me, guys, I felt like, looking back, if I see the time that I wasted with my GMAT prep, the biggest problem was no one taught me how to read the passage, and my focus entirely shifted to time-saving reading strategies, basically. And that's where the biggest problem is. Like, we don't understand how to read in the first place, and that's where the problem lies. Okay, Shubham says, yes, I've learned this, but I'm still struggling. So Shubham, again, there's a very, very, very high chance that you have learned it, you have understood that, but you're not able to apply it still properly. So if you want, you can schedule a call on my calendar. Happy to connect with you, understand from you what is that you're doing wrong, and help you from there. Because obviously, I have been through that journey, so I can very well understand when people are able to apply that learning properly or not. So it's very important that you read the passages right. So obviously, one part of it is someone teaching you, the other part of it is you being able to apply it as well. Both are important. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Please understand this. See, in quant, when I look back on quant, how I approached quant was that in quant, I don't just learn a concept. When I learn a concept, I always follow that up with a proper method as well. For example, let's say if I have to solve two variables, I know that we need two equations minimum, right? For example, let's say if I have two equations like this, 2x plus 3y is equal to 10, and let's say what x plus y is equal to 6. I know that these two equations I can solve for x and y. But if only one of these equations was given to me, can I solve for x and y? Yes, it is possible sometimes if there is an additional constraint which is given to me. So this is one concept that I learned in quant. But it's not just this concept that I learned. I also learned how to solve questions in this concept. So let's take, for example, this question overall. Okay, now I'm going to not ask you to solve this question because I want you to just understand this thought process that in quant, we always learn concepts, but we don't learn concepts alone. We learn concepts along with methods. And that gives us the results, or that gives us the success that we need, basically. So that's what is important to understand even for like verbal section. Okay. So for example, if I have to solve this equation, linear equation, 5x plus 3y equal to 76 for x and y, I have a constraint that they are positive integers. So in this case, I learned an approach that, okay, first step is to find a possible solution, basically just a possible solution, any one value that fits this equation. Okay, so I will try to do that. I'll try to write this as 76 minus 5x, and then I know this part, since y is a positive integer, this is a multiple of 3. This is a multiple of 3. So the right hand side should also be a multiple of 3. So I'll try to express the right hand side as a multiple of 3. So this is a multiple of 3. 75 is a multiple of 3. 6s is a multiple of 3. But the right hand side is actually this entity, right? 76 minus 5x, and be written like this. So I know that 75 minus 6x is anyway a multiple of 3. So 1 plus x should also be a multiple of 3. That means x equal to 2. That should be one of the values that satisfies basically this equation. Okay, so x equal to 2, if I plug in over here, I get the value of y as 22. Okay, let me just check it quickly. Yes, it is 22. Now, many of you might be thinking, why am I solving a quant question in verbal? But this will help you get a very good idea about basically how important a method is in solving verbal questions also, because in verbal we don't learn methods, and that's the biggest issue. So x will not be a multiple of 3. I guess you see it now. X plus 1 will be a multiple of 3. That's important. Okay, now once I have one set of values, the second step is basically play with the values using the coefficients. Okay, again, this is the method that we have taught in GMATWhiz. So you can go ahead in GMATWhiz, you'll see this under topic called special equations. Basically, we have taught this method and the logic also in this method. So I'm not teaching the method completely, but in simple terms, what you have to do to find other values is change the value of x by the coefficient of y. So I'll increase 2 by 3. Okay, and change the value of y by the coefficient of x, but since there's a plus sign in between, I need to decrease the value of y. So one value will be increased, the other value will be decreased. I can continue doing that, and if you see, if you place these values, it will actually fit into the equation as well. Okay, you can try doing that as many times as you want. And if I move forward, I'll get to this set of values. Then I have 14 as well as 2. But if I go any further, y will become negative. And I know that x and y are positive integers. So how many values of x are possible? There are 5 values of x which are possible. 2, 5, 8, 11, and 14. So that is my answer. 5 values. Okay. But the more important thing, as I said, was to focus on this method that I used. Okay. Now, if you don't use this method in quant, you would probably, and you just try to solve this equation by plugging in random values, you will probably take like 4 to 5 minutes and maybe not even solve the question then. And if you know this method, you can solve this question easily in 1 to 1.5 minutes. So in order to solve questions within a particular set of time, you learn methods which are logical in quant. Okay, you don't learn shortcuts. This is not a shortcut. This is a proper method. There's a logic behind what I am doing here, but I'm not able to explain it because obviously it's not a quant session right now. What you need to understand is that in verbal, we are not doing that, right? We are in verbal, what we do is in quant, we learn the concepts. Basically, we learn the concepts and then we learn the methods. Just a second, guys. Yeah. So in quant, we learn the concepts and then we learn a method to solve questions. But in verbal, what we do is, just keep this in mind. In verbal, what we do is we just learn the question types and then we move to questions, like practicing. We don't learn methods. Okay. Now, let me help you understand the importance of method in a verbal question. Okay. So let's solve an official question. This is an official question in front of you. This is a RC question, again, from the official guide. But I've just given the first para to you, first part of the para to you. First part of the passage, like the first para of the passage. And the question that is there is related to this particular passage, para only. Okay. So I want you to read this passage and solve this question. I'm giving you around 5 minutes to do that. So I'm placing myself on mute. You guys can take your time, solve this properly, and then let me know what is the answer in the chat. Okay, guys? All the best. I'll be on mute for the next 5 minutes. So guys, another 10 seconds before I end the poll. Okay, yeah, I can get your poll as well, guys. Sorry, I forgot to give the poll. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll just give you the poll. My bad, I should have thought about the poll earlier. Yeah. Okay, yeah, you have the poll now. Manal, you can respond in the poll. Shrivam, Vibhor, you can also respond in the poll. Okay, guys, great. So since 5 minutes are over, we have given you 5 minutes, 30 seconds to be specific right now, to be precise right now. Okay, so I'll just ending the poll in another 10 seconds. So those who are polling, you can take another 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, guys, so this is, as you can see, you should be able to see the poll results. This is a very difficult question for most people. I see very varied responses. I have people selecting all 5 choices, basically. 50% of you are going with choice B, which is sadly not the right answer, basically. The right answer is not B. I'm going to tell you what is the right answer, but hold on to your thoughts right now, because the objective of taking this question is not to help you learn how to solve this question. The objective of taking this question is to help you learn how to read passages. And if you don't know that, if you don't learn that, then knowing the answer to this question also is not going to help you anyway, because this question is going to not run a repeat on GMAT, right? So let's focus on the reading side. Now, the main reason why I gave this passage was to highlight some of the common problems that people face in RC. Many people, like, you can go ahead and feel free to tell me what are the issues that you face with this particular RC. If you face the same issues, you can mention that as well. That's okay. But what are the issues that you face? You can mention that. Many people are confused about the meaning. They understand what the passage is talking about, but they don't have an in-depth understanding of the meaning. And because of that lack of in-depth understanding, they need to refer back to the passage again and again. And even after referring back, their confidence doesn't improve, because what happens is that if you're in the beginning itself, if you did not probably understand the meaning, even if you refer back to the passage again and again, you would most likely not understand the meaning later also, because you are doing the second reading in a more rushed timeline than the first one. You might think you're doing it relaxed, but you will never be able to do that. And in the second read, you're not able to read the entire passage either. You read it in bits and pieces. So what happens is that they mark answers with low confidence. Okay, and let me ask you guys, how many of you were 100% confident when you were marking the answer in the poll? How many of you were 100% confident? You can just say a yes or no. And I'm talking about 100% confidence. I'm not talking about 90% confidence. How many of you were 100% certain? If you were 100% certain while marking the answer in the poll that, okay, option B is the correct answer or option A is the correct answer, say a yes. If you were not 100% certain, say a no. Okay, I see some responses coming in. Let's wait for a few more results. But that's a very, very common problem. Now, I have faced the same issues as a student myself, and that's why I'm stressing a lot on this. So Ankit and Astha, you can just respond in the poll itself. There's a poll which says yes, no, you can just respond in that poll, basically. So I've seen that, faced that as a student, and I've come a lot forward from there. And actually, now I have understood why I was low on confidence and where I was going wrong. Okay, so let's understand that. And I see around 66% of you saying that I was not confident, and 33% of you saying that I was 100% confident about the answer. That's good to know. So let's understand the right reading style. So the right reading style in RC is not about skimming. The right reading style is not about just understanding what is written. Let us go back one step. So the right understanding is not just understanding what is written. The what is not important. The main thing in RC is to understand why is it written. If you are able to understand the why, everything else will be crystal clear to you. Trust me, it will be very, very clear to you. So let's read that. I'm going to show you the reading style. And since I'm showing it to you, I'll be a little slow while doing it. Obviously, when I do this myself, I still remember when I did this passage for the very first time. For the first para, I took 3.5 minutes to read and understand when I did it for the first time. But today, I might take slightly longer because I have to explain my thoughts to you also. So let's do that. So this is how I read the passage. It is an odd but indisputable fact. Okay, the moment I read this, I stop. Many people don't do that. They will continue reading. But what I do is I always read and stop and try and understand each part individually. So it is an odd but indisputable fact. What it tells me is that there is something, a fact, which is odd, but there is no dispute around that. So it's understandable. Everyone agrees on that fact, that this is a fact. There's no dispute, but it is odd. And this is written by the author. It is an odd and indisputable fact. That means it is the author's opinion. It is very important in RCs to understand if there's an opinion, whose opinion it is. Is the author agreeing to it, disagreeing to it? That's a very important thing that you need to do, because that helps you to understand the intent. In many cases in GMAT, you will see, and in fact in this passage also we will see, that author presents some other person's point of view, but if you don't pay proper attention to it, you might think that it's the author's opinion. And when the questions are talking about which of the following is the author most likely to agree with, you might choose that as an answer. But in reality, the author was presenting some other person's opinion, and we'll see that. So it's important to think about the author's opinion. So till now what we read was that there's something which is odd but indisputable fact. What is the fact about? Let's read that. Okay, so this is explaining the fact that the 17th century English women, okay, the English women of the 17th century, who, so this is qualifying the women, are generally regarded. Generally regarded means generally considered. Author may not be agreeing or disagreeing to it. He's saying a thing is are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. Okay, these people were among the forerunners of modern feminism. This 17th century English women. These are, now this verb is this noun. These are almost all identified, almost every one of them identified with the royalist side, one side in the conflict between whom? Between two things, royalists and parliamentarians, known as the English Civil Wars. So I don't need to go into the detail. If you go into the detail, you might think, okay, you know what, there is English Civil War, there are two parties, royalists, parliamentarians. I don't need to go into all of that. What I need to know is that there are two parties, RNP, some war is going on. What is odd about the fact is that almost all English women were in party royalists, not party parliamentarians. But the author still hasn't told me why it is odd. What is odd about this? Why is it odd? He has not given me any reasoning. Why is it odd? Should they be equally divided? I don't know that. And if they should be equally divided, then why? That rationale is not given to me. Probably that rationale will come next. Again, this is what is called as pre-reading. Pre-reading as in, you can call it pre-thinking also if you want to. But it's also about trying to preempt what is going to come next. Now, is there a benefit of preempting? Can anyone tell me what is the benefit of preempting? And feel free to share your thoughts. I'd love to see if you are able to connect to this. But in the interest of time, I'll move forward. The benefit of preempting is that it makes you more connected to the passage. It helps you, and in case your preempting is right, then it helps you to also read things faster and more logically. And if it is wrong, you will get to know it's wrong, right? You'll get to know that the author is actually thinking about something else. So in any case, it helps you connect to the passage better. And that's when you get questions right. So let's read further. Since royalist ideology is often associated, okay, when I say often associated, this means this is other party's opinion. Okay, often associated means often associated by others. So the author still doesn't agree to this. But let's read. Since is a cause-effect marker. So since royalist ideology is often associated with the radical patriarchalism of 17th century, same time, political theorist Robert Filmer. Okay, so he's saying that since royalist thought process is basically linked to a patriarchalism of a particular theorist, something happens. But then I see a hyphen, and then an explanation of a patriarchalism. So I'll dissociate myself with this cause part right now. I'll just focus on the definition. A patriarchalism that equates family and kingdom. Okay, that equates family and kingdom and asserts the divinely ordained absolute power of the king, and by analogy of the male head of the household. Okay, so it's saying that as a kingdom is ruled by a king, the family should be ruled by the male head. That's the patriarchalism all about. That's the patriarchalism of Robert Filmer, basically. So going back to what the author was saying, that since this ideology of royalists is associated with this radical patriarchalism, historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact Now, historians, this is again other parties. But when you see the word understandably puzzled, that means the author somehow agrees. The author agrees to this thing that it is puzzling. It is indeed puzzling to see that royalist women wrote the earliest extended criticism of the absolute subordination of women in marriage and the earliest systematic assertion of women's rational and moral equality with men. So what he's trying to say is that since the royalist ideology is supposed to be linked to the radical patriarchalism, it's actually weird. It's actually kind of puzzling to see that the royalist women were the ones who actually wrote the extended criticism, basically the extended excess criticism that happened of this patriarchalism was something which is weird to see because of that. Okay, so what we need to really understand is that here in the first part he presented a fact which was odd. He didn't tell me what, it didn't tell us what was, why the fact was odd. Now he's telling us why this fact is odd. Why is this fact odd? And in the way of doing so, he actually introduces a paradox that, okay, ideally the royalist ideology is supposed to be based on patriarchalism, and because of that, ideally this entire thing should not be happening in the first place. They should not be criticizing the patriarchalism at all. But in reality, they are doing that. So probably the next passage, next line is going to be talking about that. Let's read further. Some historians have questioned the facile equation of royalist ideology with Filmarian architecture, patriarchalism. So he's saying that some historians, again, focus on that word. He's not representing himself. He's telling that some people have questioned that. He's not questioning it. Whether royalist ideology is at all focused on, at all associated with Filmarian patriarchalism. And indeed, now when I see the word indeed, it is now telling me that the author is saying something in favor of this. And indeed, they are or against it. He's stressing on that fact. And indeed, there may have been no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on issues of family organization and women political rights. So then he's saying that he also thinks that there might not be many consistent differences in the way the family organization between these two parties work. But now that but again tells me the author's opinion. Now his author's opinion. In that case, one would expect early feminists to be equally divided between the two sides. So then now he's saying that if there was no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians in the family organization and ideology, then ideally they should have been equally divided. But since they are not equally divided, what he's trying to say is that probably royalist ideology is to deal with Filmarian architecture, patriarchalism. Now, what I do always is, like, as a student, I never did this initially, but later on when I struggled and I changed my reading style, I started creating a mind map. Now, sometimes doing this mind map on a piece of paper initially is required, but later on you should be keeping it as a mind map only. So what I did was I broke down this paragraph and I thought about, okay, first part is talking about an indisputable strange fact. That's the introduction of the fact. Second paragraph is telling me why this fact is strange. The author's argument around it. He's highlighting a tension between two sides. He's telling us that this is not something which should happen. There's a paradox that is there. Basically, he's highlighting why the fact is strange. And he's then saying that there should be a reason for this anomaly. Why this exists, there should be a reason. Now, when you do this mind map, you understand that it's not just this. Probably next paragraph is gonna give us examples or explain the reason for the anomaly. And if you do that, you'll be actually reading the passage much faster. So if I remember my initial reading, the first time when I read this passage very clearly, the second para started here. And if you see, the second para actually talks about a particular example, gives the reason. And it's just not, the complete para is not shown to you here, but it is actually focusing on the same thing. And I remember my reading time was 3.5 minutes for the first para. I had to reread certain parts of the second sentence. I remember that because second sentence was like very difficult to read, very long sentence. I had to break down, read it. So I took 3.5 minutes to read the first para. But the good thing was, because of my preemptive reading, preempting what is going to come next, I was able to read the second para in 1.5 minutes, because the second para was all about examples and the rationale and the reasoning being given behind that, basically. So the entire time for reading the para was just 5 minutes, guys. And 4 minutes was what I took to actually do 4 questions based on the passage, and I got 100% accuracy in the passage. And by the way, guys, this is a 805 level passage. This is the most difficult level that you get on GMAT. Nothing can be more difficult than this. I got 100% questions correct within 9 minutes, 4 questions. That's gold on GMAT. Now, if you skim through the passage, which is what I see people doing most of the times, I was doing that in the beginning phases. What most people do is they read the first para in 1.5 minutes. They read the second para in 1.5 minutes, but then for the 4 questions, they end up spending 7 minutes. A lot of back and forth. Every question takes about 1 minute, 40 seconds to 2 minutes, and the total time to solve the passage is 10 minutes. And that's not the worst part. Timing was bad. That's one thing. Like, I took 9 minutes to solve this passage. Most people take 10 minutes to solve this passage. Problem is, I was still able to get 100% accuracy in this passage. 4 very hard questions, getting them right is like gold on GMAT. That gets you to 90+ percentile very, very easily on GMAT. On the other hand, with people who are doing skimming, they're not just giving 10 minutes to the passage. They'll probably end up with 25 to 40% accuracy on this passages, and that's the worst part of it, basically. Now, some of you might be thinking that, Piyush, the reading style that you showed us, is that even possible to read the first para in 3.5 minutes? How many of you are thinking that is it really possible to read that first para that you read in 3.5 minutes? Is it even possible to do that in the test in 3.5 minutes? How many of you are thinking that? Let's do a quick yes no, guys. I want you to be very honest. If you think that the style I read the passage in cannot be done in 3.5 minutes for the first para, say a no. If you think it is possible, say a yes. I want to see your thoughts. And please be honest, guys. You can be blatantly honest. That's okay. If you think it's not possible to read the way I read in 3.5 minutes, say no. Okay. I'm ending the poll. I see all of you saying no, right? That is not possible. So I also agree. It is not possible if you are doing it for the first time. You cannot do it in the first time. Trust me, I was not able to do it in the first time. Timing efficiency develops over a period of time. Let's break down reading time and solving 4 questions time, the passage time, into these 2 parts. When I was a student, when I was in initial phases, I used to take about 7 to 10 minutes to read the entire passage. It was more like 10 minutes basically in the initial days. Okay, and solving questions, 4 questions used to take me about 5 minutes. But as I practiced this method over a period of time, so initially I was taking 14 to 15 minutes per passage. But as I was practicing this method, when I moved to advanced stages, I'm able to now do it in 8 to 9 minutes. You give me any passage in the world, any passage, any damn passage, I can do this right now as well. Okay. Yes, Shubham, it might seem quite difficult, but it is actually not difficult if you practice it right. And trust me, guys, this is not something supernatural. I'm not talking about something which is supernatural, guys. Let's take an example. Okay. Let's take an example of driving a car. Think about the day when you started learning how to drive a car. You had to think about the accelerator, the brake, the clutch, the gears, the side mirror, the front back mirror, and steering wheel, and so many other things at the same time. You had probably a very bad experience in the beginning. You were worried that you will be able to manage all those things. There were cars rushing through by you and all of that. It was so difficult to learn it. But when you did that, practice that over a period of time, now you can probably drive a car even by speaking to the co-passenger or speaking on the phone. Not that I recommend speaking on the phone, but you can probably drive the car subconsciously. Because understand it this way, this is how your mind works. Our mind has 2 parts to it. We have a conscious mind, basically, okay, and we have a subconscious mind, okay. So we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. The conscious mind is slow. The subconscious mind is very fast. And the way our brain is wired is that whenever you learn something new, it will always be done by your conscious mind because it's something new. Your brain is not used to that. So your conscious mind is the one that is working initially on that. And that's why you will be slow with that. Okay, that's why you will be slow with that. But once you do that a decent number of times, your subconscious mind takes that process over, and that's when you become fast. And that's what is happening over here exactly. The problem is you should let your conscious mind train your subconscious mind. The problem is people do not let that process happen. What they do is they force themselves to read the passage fast. They say, okay, you know what, Piyush, I need to come take down my passage reading time from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll just read faster. Guys, that's not how it works. When you're learning how to drive a car, you cannot just drive a car at 200 kilometers per hour on the first day. You'll meet with an accident, and that's what is happening with you in verbal. You're meeting with an accident just because you're forcing yourself to read faster. Your conscious mind needs to train your subconscious mind, and that training will only happen when you read it right. Okay, guys? So please understand that it is not something supernatural. I also took 10 minutes first to read the passage, but now I'm faster because I know where to focus my attention. Now, if you have done that, now I'll also solve this question for you guys to understand what is right and wrong over here. But if you have done that, the answer will be very easy for you to solve. Let's read this. The author of the passage refers to Robert Filmer primarily in order to. Okay, so the author is talking about Robert Filmer in the second line. And we saw that in the second line, he's giving us the reasoning why the fact is odd. He's telling us there is a difference in opinion that exists in the royalist women when it should not have existed because they have been associated with a radical patriarchalism. That's the reason why he has referred to Robert Filmer. So that is what I will think before going to the options. Then eliminating options is easier for me. Okay, option A. Show that royalist ideology was somewhat more radical than most historians appear to realize. Now, there is nowhere the author has been talking about ideology being more radical or less radical. He just thinks that it is radical, but it's not more or less. So there's no point about showing more or less about that. Option B, which was picked by most of you, by the way, qualify the claim that patriarchalism formed the basis of royalist ideology. He's not doing that. See, in the second line, he's not at all talking about whether this claim is correct or incorrect. If at all he's talking about that, he's talking about that in the third line. Moreover, qualifying the claim basically means putting limitations to the claim, that in these cases, the claim is correct, and in the other cases, the claim is not correct. As in defining certain situations in which this is right and certain situations in which it won't be right. So that's not what the author is doing at all. He's not qualifying the claim. Sorry guys, I told you my cough could get bad anytime. Probably it's the medicine effect wearing off. Now, option C. Question the view that most early feminists were associated with royalist faction. No, not at all. Because he's simply saying in the first part itself that it is indisputable that they are on one side. Highlight an apparent tension between royalist ideology and ideas of the early feminists. Yes, he's exactly doing this. He's telling us through this line that there is that difference in opinion that exists between the two parties, basically. Okay, what I said for option B was that qualifying the claim, qualifying basically means that you are putting restrictions or putting limitations to the claim, that in these cases, we can say, let's say there are two cases. In case one, we can say that royalist ideology is based on patriarchalism. In case two, we cannot say that. Okay, so author is clearly not doing that. Moreover, in the second line, to which this question is talking about, it's talking about the second line of the first para. He's not doing any of that. He's not even talking about whether the claim is right or not. He's just presenting the fact. Okay, so B is definitely wrong. Now, those of you who don't read the passage right, you don't understand the intent, you don't question the why part, you will pick choice B. That's the most popular choice, even more popular than the correct answer, because you don't understand the intent then. You just understand what is happening at surface. He's talking about royalist ideology, patriarchalism, questioning that. Some people have questioned that. But if you understand it properly, you'll understand they're not doing any limitations. They're not basically talking about qualification or anything. Option E is also incorrect because he's not arguing whether royalists held conflicting opinions. He's not arguing about that. It's not about that. It's simply about presenting that there is a difference in opinion that existed. He's not arguing whether they have had a difference in opinion in the family organization and women political rights is not what they're talking about, by the way. Anyway, it's feminism that we're talking about over here. So what I wanted to present was that if you are skimming, it won't work on hard questions on GMAT. And if you don't get the hard questions right, there's no way you can get a high score on GMAT because it's an adaptive test. 85% of the GMAT questions are inferential in nature. But what that means is that you need to read between the lines. You need to read between the lines to kind of get the questions right. And that's why skimming will not work on GMAT. So the solution to the problem in your verbal is you need to learn right methods also. And that's why I was talking about quant, if you guys remember. Because in quant, we always learn proper methods. When you learn proper methods along with concepts, you're able to apply them consistently and you get the question right. On the other hand, if you don't learn proper methods, you'll always struggle. So it's very important that you also learn how to read as well. So the key difference between me doing very poorly on GMAT and doing very well was my focus shifted from reading speed to comprehension speed. Now I don't focus on reading speed now. I focus on how quickly can I comprehend things. And they are two very different things. I can read without thinking about, like, if I ask you, are you a good quick reader? Trust me, everyone can be a quick reader. If I don't have to understand, I can read gibberish also very fast. Okay, it's about comprehension that matters on GMAT. So in order to build the right RC skills, you need to understand where to pause. You need to understand how to take care of complex words that you don't know about. You need to differentiate between facts and opinions. You need to differentiate author's opinion from third-party opinions, and all of that will eventually help you understand the intent of the author. And all of this has to be done in a systematic fashion. The entire GMATWhiz RC course is developed in a way that helps you to do that. This entire portion that you see, about 8 to 9 hours of effort, is focused on just teaching you how to read. All these steps, all these small steps that I showed you in this part are broken down over here in these units, where you learn each topic, each skill one step at a time, and then you have focused exercises on all these skills where you will be able to apply those exercises. Okay, so I'm just showing you some stuff. Now, when I did that, how did my study schedule evolve? Now, when I used to study earlier, now I'm going back to old Piyush once again, guys, for your reference. My earlier study strategy was, okay, learn concepts, practice questions, and do more questions. Read tutorials. I was clueless because I was obviously struggling. So it was this movie comes to my mind, Live, Die, Repeat. If anyone of you have seen that, it's where Tom Cruise dies whenever he dies, he gets back at the beginning of a particular sequence once again, and he repeats that sequence as many times he dies. So it was like that. Like, I'm doing the same thing, repeating the same thing, not really sure what's happening. So what you have to do is, in GMAT Verbal, you have to do skill-based learning. There are 3 skills that are tested on GMAT Verbal. First skill is comprehension, which we talked about. Second skill is analytical reasoning. Are you able to reason with the information given, whether the information makes sense or not? Are there logical flaws in the information or not? And are you able to also identify the main idea? Now, CR tests you on the first 2 skills, RC tests you on the next 2 skills. So it is very critical that before learning RC, you learn CR and then move to RC. Because if you're not able to work with smaller context, like in CR, you'll have a 3 to 4 line kind of context. In RC, you'll have multiple such things basically in one place. So if you're not able to work with CR, you'll not be able to work with RC. And try to learn the right methods. In CR at GMATWhiz, we use this method called framework-driven pre-thinking. And I'll give you a free trial link also in case you guys want to check out the basically free trial of GMATWhiz. You can check out this link basically, and it will help you to understand, get an idea about the pre-thinking style that I'm talking about as well. So framework-driven pre-thinking is what we teach in CR, and RC I showed you involved and evolved reading. And whenever you learn a particular topic, learn the concepts first, then learn a proper method, and that's when you go to practicing questions. That will ensure you success on GMAT. Okay. Now, after learning the method, it is also very important to master the method. Okay, because see, just learning a method will make you maybe a local batsman. You can play in the gully and all, but if you want to be Virat Kohli or anyone who is very, very superior, you need to actually master the method to the T. Now, how do you do that? The key to that is analyzing questions. Okay, the mastery comes with analyzing questions, and analyzing not questions, analyzing solutions. Now, how do most people analyze solutions? They only review the questions when they get the questions wrong, and when they do that, they generally only look at options. Let's say, like let's take example of today's discussion itself. Most of you marked B as the correct answer. Now, when I was talking about choice B, many people would be just interested in the analysis between B versus D. But if you are interested in only that, you're not going to improve your score. Sorry, it will actually basically not lead to any learning whatsoever. There is no learning that has happened there, because you're just focusing on the options. In the question, in the GMAT, you'll have a different question. You should not focus on the options. You should understand the difference in the approach. You should try to look at what was your methodology and make sure that you are consistently following a logical methodology. So to master the approach, refer to solutions which are consistent and logical. This is very, very critical, guys. In GMATWhiz, every single solution will be using the same method. But for every CR question, you have framework-driven pre-thinking being used. For every RC question, you have involved and evolved reading with very deep analysis of each passage given to you. So you will have consistent solution. Make sure you verify each question irrespective of whether you get it right or wrong, because you're not just looking at the answer, you're looking at your understanding of the context also. So look at what is that you understood from the passage or the argument and match that with the solution. And spend 80% of time doing that. Note down the variances in your approach. Try to see which part of the passage you understood differently. So Shubham, I remember you were talking about RC having difficulties even after learning the method. So what is important is that you look at the difference in approach. So I showed you how to solve the passage, how to read the passage. So you should note down where you understood the passage differently from how I was reading it. Okay, so that will help you in understanding the approach correctly. So let's say, for example, you're solving a CR question. I'm not asking you to solve this question, by the way, but this is the argument which is there in front of you. In GMATWhiz, you'll see the solution like this, where we will present each line and we'll show how you should have thought about each line. Then how should you have thought about this next line, how you should have thought about this next line, and so on. So when you're reading, if you have not been thinking about this context in the same way, then you're making a mistake. Okay, and this is the same thing which one of our students, Akshat, did long back and improved his score by 80 points in just 24 days. And he was struggling big time with CR and RC. Basically, I do remember his case. And what he did in this time period was he worked on his pre-thinking approach in CR. He got back to the course of GMATWhiz, looked at how pre-thinking in CR works. And I'm going to give you the link of his interview as well. You can check out his interview at your own time. By the way, he's also studying it in CR right now. And I reviewed the solutions in depth for the correct answers too. And in GMATWhiz, we have this habit that for each option, we tell that whether it's a distortion, out of scope, irrelevant, opposite, or something like that. We have coined these terms to actually help students to eliminate the choices much more in a better way, basically. So over here, we cover all the different reasons why people get the incorrect answers. And then he revisited his weak areas to improve his understanding. Okay, and that's how he improved his score in 24 days by 80 points. Now, if you need strategy for retake, you can connect with me. I'm happy to connect. Like, there's a link which I have already shared with you and pinned on the chat, because I need to look at the different metrics to help you understand how you can improve your score. But at a broad level, what you should do is that you should look at the conceptual and application gaps. In areas where your score is less than 60%, you need to learn the concepts and formulas once again, learn how to solve questions, and then solve 15 to 20 questions. On the other hand, if your score is between 60 to 85%, logically you know the concepts, probably you're not able to apply them right. So learn how to solve questions more methodically and then practice 10 to 15 questions. So to improve your weak areas, revise the concepts, then solve questions, and make sure that while solving questions, you're learning on the method, focusing on the method part of it. Okay, and quality is more important than quantity, so don't do more questions. Rather than that, focus more on less questions and like learning from them. So optimize your weak areas, then take sectional tests, and then only go to mocks. Don't do it any other way. That's very, very important. Okay, so that's about it from my side, guys. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask me right now. So you have my WhatsApp number in front of you. Feel free to reach out to me on this number or the email ID that I have on the screen, and happy to take up your questions accordingly. And thanks for bearing with me. I really had a bad cough today. I hope you guys were able to get some good learnings from the session that will help you eventually in your GMAT score. Okay, so I don't see any questions. So thank you so much, guys, for attending the session. And I really love the interactions that we had today. And all the best from my side for your GMAT prep. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions later.